"You're HIV positive." 4 words. That's all it took to collapse her world. She was 22 weeks pregnant, 18 years old, and she had absolutely no idea how this was possible. The doctor kept talking, something about viral loads, transmission rates, immediate treatment, but his voice faded into background noise. Her ears were ringing. Her hand moved to her belly, where her baby was growing, oblivious to the war that had just begun inside both their bodies. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How did I?" "We need to start antiretroviral therapy today," the doctor interrupted gently. "With treatment, the chance of transmission to your baby drops below 1%. Without it..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. 25%. 1 in 4 chance her baby would be born with HIV, because someone gave it to her, someone who knew. "I need you to contact anyone you've had sexual relations with in the past year." The doctor continued, his pen hovering over a form. "They'll need immediate testing." She stared at him. There was only one person. There had only ever been one person. The 53-year-old retired banker waiting in his car downstairs, 35 years older than her. The man who'd noticed her struggling through retail shifts at 17 and offered her a different life. Expensive dinners, financial security, a father figure she'd never had. He'd made her feel chosen, protected, like she finally mattered to someone, and now she was pregnant with his child, living in his house, dependent on his money. "He would have told me if something was wrong," she heard herself say. He wouldn't, but even as the words left her mouth, something cold settled in her chest. Would he? Her mind raced backward through the past year. Had there been signs, symptoms she'd missed, moments that didn't add up? He'd started taking more pills recently. Vitamins, he'd said, for his age, for energy. Those business trips that seemed to multiply after his retirement, meeting former colleagues, networking lunches that stretched into evenings, the way he'd hesitated, just for a second, when she'd told him about the pregnancy. Before the smile, before the excitement. "How did this happen?" she whispered again. But this time it wasn't a medical question. It was an accusation waiting to be born. The doctor handed her paperwork, prescription orders, clinic referrals. Information she couldn't process. A future she couldn't comprehend. She walked out into the hallway on legs that didn't feel like her own. He was downstairs in the parking lot, and she was about to find out if the man she loved had tried to kill her. She didn't speak during the drive home. Just stared out the window, clutching the folder of medical documents in her lap. He asked about the appointment, said something about the baby looking healthy on the ultrasound, made a comment about dinner plans. She said nothing. When they pulled into the driveway of his expensive suburban home, the house that had felt like salvation 6 months ago, she finally turned to look at him. "I tested positive for HIV." He went still, completely still, his hands frozen on the steering wheel. Not surprise, not confusion, not the shock of someone hearing impossible news. Just stillness. "What?" he finally said, but his voice was wrong. Too controlled. Too measured. "The doctor said I'm HIV positive," she repeated, watching his face carefully now. "I need you to get tested." "I'm sure there's been a mistake." "There's no mistake." Her voice was harder now. "So either you gave it to me, or I got it from someone else, and there is no one else." They moved inside. She stood in the kitchen, his kitchen, with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances she'd once thought represented stability. He poured himself water, took a long drink, stalling. "When were you last tested?" she asked. The glass paused halfway to his mouth. "I don't remember. It's been years, probably." "Don't lie to me." Her hands were shaking now. "Not right now. Not about this." He set the glass down, looked at the floor, at the counter, anywhere but at her. "I got tested a few months ago," he admitted quietly. The room tilted. "A few months ago," she repeated slowly, "and..." Silence. "And..." Her voice rose. "What were the results?" More silence, the kind that answers everything. "Oh my God." She stepped backward, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. You knew, and you didn't tell me. How long? She demanded. How long have you known? He exhaled slowly, defeated. 3 months. 3 months. She was 22 weeks pregnant, just over 5 months. He'd known before she hit her second trimester, known while she decorated the nursery, known while they discussed baby names, known while he continued sleeping with her, unprotected, every single night. Where did you get it? Her voice was ice now. He looked up finally, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Shame. There was someone else, he said. Before you found out you were pregnant, it didn't mean anything. Who? Someone from work, from before I retired. Her chest tightened. A woman? His silence told her everything. A man, she whispered. You've been sleeping with a man. And suddenly every business lunch, every networking meeting, every late night made horrible sense. To understand how she ended up here. 18 years old, HIV positive, and pregnant by a man old enough to be her grandfather, you have to go back. Back to the little girl who waited by the window every other weekend, watching for a car that never came. Back to the birthday parties where other fathers showed up with badly wrapped presents and awkward hugs, while hers sent nothing, not even a card. Back to high school graduation, where she walked across the stage to her mother's cheers and her grandmother's proud tears, and one conspicuously empty seat. Her father hadn't died. He hadn't moved across the country. He lived 20 minutes away. He just didn't care enough to show up, and that absence carved out a space inside her that never quite healed. By 17, she'd learned to answer the question before anyone asked it. Where's your dad? Oh, he's not really in the picture. She'd say it casually, like it didn't matter. Like she hadn't spent her entire childhood wondering what was wrong with her that made him leave, what deficiencies she possessed that made her unworthy of his time. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her grandmother helped when she could. They loved her fiercely, but love doesn't erase the questions that haunt a fatherless daughter. Am I valuable? Am I worth protecting? Am I enough? She graduated high school with decent grades and no college fund. Applied to community college but couldn't afford the tuition. Took a job folding clothes at a retail store in the mall, making $9 an hour, saving for a future she couldn't quite envision. She lived with her mother in a small apartment where the walls were thin and the rent was always almost late. Took the bus to work, brought home leftover mall food court meals for dinner. Boys her age asked her out sometimes, immature, broke, still living with their parents, playing video games, talking about dreams they'd never chase. They reminded her of everything she was trying to escape, instability, uncertainty, going nowhere. She wanted more, needed more, craved the security her absent father had never provided. She just didn't realize how dangerous that craving was. Didn't understand that predators can smell father hunger on a young woman the way sharks detect blood in water. Didn't know she was walking around with a vulnerability that made her a perfect target. Until the day he walked into her store. Psychologists have a term for what she was experiencing. Father hunger. It's the deep, aching need for paternal validation that never got met. The void that shapes every relationship that comes after. Daughters with present? Engaged fathers learn early what healthy male attention looks like. They develop internal radar for men who are safe versus men who are dangerous. But fatherless daughters, they're navigating without that compass. They're more likely to enter relationships early, more likely to accept poor treatment, more likely to mistake control for care and possessiveness for protection. They're searching for the father who abandoned them in every man who shows them attention. And men who prey on young women know this. They can spot father hunger across a crowded room. He spotted hers the moment he walked through those retail store doors. He came in looking for a gift, something for a colleague's retirement party, he said. She helped him pick out a tie. made small talk about the quality of the fabric, the store's return policy, whether gift wrapping was included. He was polite, well-dressed, spoke with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of success. "You're very good at this," he told her as she rang up his purchase. "Customer service. You make it seem natural." She'd heard compliments from customers before. Usually they were awkward or creepy. Middle-aged men who lingered too long or made comments about her appearance. This felt different. He wasn't looking at her like other men did. He was looking at her like she mattered, like she was intelligent, capable, worth listening to. It was intoxicating. He came back 3 days later. "Needed help finding a watch," he said. Then a week after that, a belt this time. By the fourth visit, they both knew he wasn't really shopping. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked finally. "Just to talk. You seem like someone with ambitions beyond retail." She hesitated. He was older, obviously older, but not in a way that felt threatening. Distinguished, maybe. Gray at the temples. Lines around his eyes that suggested wisdom rather than age. "I'm only 17, she admitted, expecting that to end it. 18 soon, though?" he asked. "In 6 weeks?" He smiled. "Then I'll ask again in 6 weeks." And he did. The day after her 18th birthday, he returned with flowers and an invitation to the nicest restaurant she'd ever heard of. She said yes. Over expensive steaks she could barely pronounce, he told her about himself. Retired investment banker. Spent 30 years on Wall Street, made smart investments early, and got out before burnout claimed him. Now he spent his time managing his portfolio, traveling, enjoying the fruits of decades of discipline. He asked about her plans, her dreams, what she wanted from life. No one had ever asked her that before. Not seriously. "I want to go to college," she told him. "But I can't afford it right now. I'm saving, but at $9 an hour." He nodded thoughtfully. "What would you study?" "Maybe business, or nursing, I don't know. Something stable." "You're wise to think about stability," he said. "Most people your age don't understand its value." The way he said it, like she was mature beyond her years, made her sit a little straighter. Her mother hated him immediately. "He's 53 years old," she said after meeting him for the first time. "You're 18. That's not a relationship, that's predatory." "You don't understand," she shot back. "He's not like other guys. He's mature, stable. He actually listens to me." "Of course he listens. He's grooming you." "That's not what this is." But her mother wouldn't let it go. Neither would her grandmother. They saw red flags she refused to acknowledge. The age gap, the power imbalance, the way he'd waited barely until she was legal. How quickly he offered solutions to all her financial problems. "He makes me feel safe," she insisted. "He makes me feel like I matter, like someone actually wants me around." Her mother's face softened with recognition and pain. "Baby, that's exactly what predators do. They find the hole your father left and they fill it." But she was already too far gone to hear it. 3 months after their first official date, she moved into his house. Her mother begged her not to. Her grandmother cried. Her friends from high school called her crazy. She went anyway. The house wasn't just nice, it was a mansion. 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, marble floors in the entryway, a kitchen that looked like something from a cooking show, a backyard with an infinity pool overlooking manicured gardens. He paid off her credit card debt. Not much, just $800, but it had felt crushing. He bought her a brand new Mercedes. Took her shopping at stores where a single dress cost more than her old monthly rent. For the first time in her life, money wasn't a concern. She quit her retail job. He insisted she didn't need to work. Should focus on enrolling in community college instead. He'd take care of everything. She felt like Cinderella, like someone had waved a magic wand and transformed her entire existence. Dinners at restaurants where reservations required weeks of advance notice. Weekend trips to wine country. Jewelry that came in small velvet boxes. A credit card with her name on it and no limit she ever hit. Her friends stopped calling. Partially because she stopped relating to their struggles. Complaining about rent and student loans felt trivial now. Partially because they didn't approve and made it obvious. She didn't care. She had everything she'd ever wanted. Except she was also increasingly isolated. Her family barely spoke to her. Her old life felt like it belonged to someone else. She was completely dependent on him. Financially, socially, emotionally. And then 4 months after moving in, she got pregnant. She thought it was an accident. He said he was thrilled. "We're gonna have a baby," she told him, terrified he'd be angry. Instead, he pulled her close, kissed her forehead, said all the right things. "This is perfect. We'll be a family." A family. The word made her chest ache with hope. She'd never had a real family, not the kind with 2 parents and stability and safety. Her father had made sure of that. But now she could build one. Be the mother she'd needed. Give her child the father she'd never had. She started planning immediately. Researching cribs and car seats, painting one of the spare bedrooms a soft yellow, folding tiny clothes she bought on shopping trips he funded with a smile. This was it. Everything she'd been searching for. Security, family, someone who chose her and stayed. She was finally going to have everything her absent father had denied her. She had no idea the family she was building was already poisoned. While she painted the nursery walls, he was at lunch meetings. While she assembled the crib, carefully following instructions and double-checking every bolt, he was networking with former colleagues. While she washed tiny onesies in fragrance-free detergent and folded them into neat stacks, he was reviewing investment opportunities. She believed every word. Why wouldn't she? He was a retired investment banker. Of course he had meetings. Successful people don't just stop working. They manage their wealth, maintain connections, explore new ventures. He'd leave mid-morning in tailored suits. Return by dinner smelling like expensive cologne and sometimes scotch. He'd ask about her day, admire whatever progress she'd made on the nursery, rest his hand on her growing belly. The perfect partner. The attentive father-to-be. She never questioned where he really went. The truth was far darker. Those lunch meetings, hotel rooms downtown, expensive suites booked by the hour under fake names. Those networking sessions, rendezvous with his former boss, a married executive still working in finance, a man he'd reported to for 15 years before retirement. Those investment reviews, afternoons in bed with someone who wasn't her. The affair had started almost a year ago, long before she got pregnant. Back when she was still working retail and he was still shopping for ties he didn't need. It was risky, reckless. His former boss had a wife, children, a reputation to protect. They met in secret, deleted messages, paid cash for rooms, and they didn't use protection. Neither of them thought about consequences until it was too late, until one of them tested positive. He got his diagnosis 3 months into her pregnancy. Sat in a different doctor's office, heard the same words she'd eventually hear, got the same pamphlets about treatment and viral loads and transmission risks. The doctor asked if he had any partners who needed to be notified. He lied, said no. Said he'd been celibate since his divorce years ago. Must have been a contaminated needle somewhere, maybe dental work, who knows. He left with prescriptions he'd fill at a pharmacy across town where nobody knew him. And he went home to his pregnant 18-year-old girlfriend and said nothing. While she decorated the nursery, he was building a lie that could kill her. His former boss was named Richard, 58 years old. Senior vice president at the investment firm where he'd spent 3 decades. They'd worked together for 15 years. Professional relationship at first, mentor and protege. Richard had fast-tracked his promotions, vouched for him on major deals, treated him like a trusted partner. Somewhere along the way, it became something else. Late nights at the office that turned into drinks, business trips where they shared more than strategy. A connection that crossed lines neither of them acknowledged publicly. Richard was married, had been for 30 years, 3 grown children, grandchildren on the way, country club membership, a house in the suburbs that looked perfect from the outside. He was also closeted, living a double life that predated retirement by more than a decade, and he wasn't careful. After retirement, the affair intensified. No more hiding behind late office hours. No more pretending business trips were actually business. They met twice a week, sometimes more. Always the same boutique hotel in the financial district where discretion was guaranteed for the right price. Richard would book the room. He'd arrive during his extended lunch break. They'd have 2 hours before Richard had to return to the office and maintain his charade of heterosexual respectability. Neither used protection. Why would they? They were both in monogamous relationships, or so they told themselves. Richard didn't know about the other men in his lover's past, and he certainly didn't know about the 18-year-old girlfriend sleeping in his bed at night. They were both lying, both hiding, both playing dangerous games with other people's lives. And then Richard got sick. Richard tested positive first. Routine physical required by his insurance. The doctor called with results that shattered everything. He panicked, called his lover immediately. "You need to get tested, now." The 53-year-old retired banker went the next day. Positive. He sat in the parking lot of the clinic, staring at the paperwork. Treatment options, disclosure requirements, partner notification protocols. He thought about the 18-year-old at home, 2 months pregnant with his child, completely dependent on him. He could tell her, should tell her. Instead, he drove to the pharmacy, filled his prescriptions, hid the bottles in his home office, and went back to her bed that night like nothing had changed. 3 months is 90 days, 90 days of waking up next to her, 90 days of watching her belly grow, 90 days of listening to her talk about baby names and nursery colors and whether they should find out the gender or be surprised. 90 days of lying. Every morning he took his antiretroviral medication in private, locked the bathroom door, swallowed the pills with water, hid the bottles in a briefcase she never opened. Every night he came to bed and touched her like nothing was wrong. The doctor had been clear during his diagnosis appointment. HIV-positive individuals must disclose their status to sexual partners. Failure to do so before engaging in activities that could transmit the virus is a felony in most states. He knew this. He knew that pregnant women are particularly vulnerable, that transmission to a fetus is a devastating possibility. He knew all of it, and he stayed silent anyway. The medical records would later paint a damning picture. First doctor's visit. Early in her 2nd month of pregnancy, HIV diagnosis confirmed. Prescription for Triamec, a common antiretroviral medication. Cost, $3,800 per month. Follow-up appointment 2 weeks later, viral load check, counseling about disclosure obligations, partner notification forms left blank. Pharmacy records, monthly refills. Same location, same pharmacist who asked each time, "Have you informed your partners of your status?" Same answer, "Yes, I have." Another lie. Monthly blood work to monitor his viral load. The medication was working. His numbers were dropping. Undetectable within 6 weeks of starting treatment, which meant the risk of transmission was decreasing for him personally. But she didn't know to protect herself, didn't know to insist on barrier protection, didn't know that every time they were intimate, he was playing Russian roulette with her life and their babies. The criminal reality was stark. Without treatment, an HIV-positive pregnant woman has a 25% chance of transmitting the virus to her baby. 1 in 4. Those are devastating odds. With proper antiretroviral therapy started early in pregnancy, that risk drops below 1%. But treatment requires knowledge. You can't protect yourself from a threat you don't know exists. He stole those 3 months from her. 3 months when early intervention could have made all the difference. 3 months of viral exposure during critical fetal development. He made a calculated choice. His secret was more important than her health. His comfort was more valuable than their baby's life. And when she finally discovered the truth at 22 weeks, half her pregnancy was already gone, half the time for treatment. Double the risk. All because he chose silence. Why didn't he tell her? The question haunted investigators later. Haunted prosecutors. Haunted everyone who heard this story. He wasn't stupid. He understood the legal consequences. Knew that knowingly transmitting HIV was a felony. Knew he could face prison time. So why risk it? The answer was as calculated as any investment decision he'd made on Wall Street. Control. She had no money, no job, no health insurance of her own. She was completely financially dependent on him. By design, if he told her the truth at 2 months pregnant, she'd have options. She could leave, could get her own treatment, could press charges immediately while the evidence was fresh. But if he waited, if he let her get further into the pregnancy, more dependent, more trapped, then she'd need him. His wealth, his insurance, his several $1,000 monthly medication costs. She couldn't afford to leave. He'd done the math. Antiretroviral therapy, $300-800 per month minimum. Prenatal care for an HIV-positive pregnancy, specialist appointments, additional monitoring, extra ultrasounds, delivery at a facility equipped for high-risk births, immediate postnatal treatment for the baby. Tens of thousands of dollars, possibly hundreds of thousands over time. She had nothing. Made $9 an hour before she quit. No family with resources, no safety net. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted to save their baby, she'd need him. That dependency was leverage. Insurance against her leaving, against her reporting him. Or so he thought. What he didn't account for was her rage, the primal fury of a mother whose child had been endangered. The willingness to risk everything, even financial ruin, to see justice done. He underestimated her completely. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. She sat in a gray interview room, hands wrapped around her swollen belly, trying to explain to a detective how the man she loved had tried to kill her. "Walk me through the timeline," the detective said, pen ready. Her voice was gentle but professional. She'd done this before. "I found out I was positive 3 days ago, at my 22-week appointment." Her voice cracked. "When I confronted him, he admitted he's known for 3 months. The detective's pen stopped moving. "He knew his status and continued having sexual relations with you?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "We never used protection. He said we didn't need to, that we were committed. That..." She couldn't finish, because saying it out loud made her feel so incredibly stupid. How had she not seen this coming? "This isn't your fault," the detective said firmly, reading her expression. "You understand that, right? He's the one who committed a crime." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like she should have known, should have questioned, should have demanded answers when he started taking those mystery pills he claimed were vitamins. "In your state, knowingly transmitting HIV without disclosure is a felony," the detective explained. "We'll need his medical records, which we can subpoena. If he was diagnosed before you and continued intimate contact without informing you, that's criminal transmission. Potentially reckless endangerment of your unborn child as well." Criminal transmission. Reckless endangerment. Legal terms for, he tried to kill us. "Why do you think he didn't tell you?" the detective asked. She stared at her hands, couldn't look up. Her voice broke when she finally answered. "Because I had nowhere else to go. Because he knew I needed him." The detective leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about how you two met." And so she did. The whole story tumbled out. The retail job, her absent father, how mature and stable he'd seemed, how he'd made her feel safe for the first time in her life, how quickly she'd moved in, how completely she depended on him. As she spoke, she heard it. Really heard it for the first time. The pattern, the targeting, the grooming. "He knew," she said slowly, the realization settling like lead in her stomach. "He knew exactly what he was doing. He saw what I was missing and he used it. Her father had left a hole, and this man had filled it with poison. The detective nodded sadly. That's what predators do. They find the wound and exploit it. The detective pulled out a folder. Not his file, a different one. I want to show you something, she said. These are common patterns we see in age gap exploitation cases. Tell me if anything sounds familiar. She began reading from a printed document. Target selection. Predators seek out individuals with absent parents or unstable home lives. Love bombing. Excessive attention, gifts, making the target feel special or chosen. Isolation. Gradual separation from family and friends who might question the relationship. Financial control. Creating complete economic dependence. Normalization. Convincing the target that the age gap is sophisticated rather than predatory. Rushed commitment. Moving in together, pregnancy, major life decisions within months. She listened. Every single pattern applied to her relationship. Every single one. This isn't about him specifically, the detective said quietly. This is the playbook, and he followed it perfectly. He waited until you were legal, the detective continued. Came into your workplace multiple times before asking you out. Made it seem like you initiated the relationship, didn't he? Like you chose him? She nodded slowly. She had felt like she'd chosen him, like she'd been the lucky one. That's intentional. Predators don't want to feel like predators. They create situations where the target feels empowered, in control. It provides cover. If anyone questions it later, they can say she wanted this or she pursued me. Her stomach turned. And your father? The detective asked. How long has he been out of your life? Always. He left before I was born. The detective's expression softened with recognition. He knew that, didn't he? About your father? I told him, early on. He asked about my family and I. She'd told him everything, given him the blueprint for her vulnerabilities. Predators are excellent listeners, the detective said. They ask questions, seem genuinely interested, make you feel heard in ways maybe you've never felt before. And they're collecting data, learning exactly what you need so they can become it. She thought about those early conversations, how he'd asked about her childhood, her dreams, her fears, how attentive he'd seemed, how different from boys her age who only talked about themselves. He positioned himself as everything your father wasn't, the detective continued. Stable, present, financially secure, protective. That's not coincidence, that's strategy. The word hit like a slap. Strategy. Their entire relationship had been a calculated plan. The age gap isn't the problem by itself, the detective added. It's the power imbalance. The intentional targeting of someone young and vulnerable. The exploitation of unmet childhood needs. She'd spent 18 years hungry for a father, and he'd fed her poison disguised as love. When you look back now, the detective asked, can you see moments where he tested boundaries? Small things at first? She thought about it. The way he'd suggested she quit her job, how he'd discouraged her from visiting her mother so often because it stressed her out. The way he'd paid off her small debts and then reminded her of his generosity when she disagreed with him. Little hooks, each one barely noticeable. Together they'd built a cage. She stared at the records spread across the table. Credit card statements, bank transfers. Each transaction told a story she'd been too blind to see. The expensive dinners that came with lectures about gratitude. The designer clothes that made her feel indebted. Wealth makes it harder to see, the detective said, because we associate money with success, intelligence, trustworthiness. We think rich men don't need to be predators. But wealth is just another tool. It funds better lies. She looked down at her designer clothes, her expensive shoes, beautiful wrapping paper around a deadly gift. She started antiretroviral therapy the same day she filed the police report. 3 pills, Triamec, once daily, for the rest of her life. The pharmacist went through the instructions with mechanical efficiency. Take with food. Don't miss doses. Side effects may include nausea, headaches, fatigue, insomnia, depression. Depression is listed as a side effect, she asked. The pharmacist looked up from the paperwork, saw the pregnancy, the red eyes from crying, the trembling hands. Yes, she said more gently, but given everything you're dealing with, we'll monitor you closely. You have a support system? She thought about her mother, who she'd barely spoken to in months, her grandmother who'd warned her, friends she'd lost touch with. I'm working on it, she lied. The medication cost $3,800. His insurance covered it. She hated that she needed him for this too. The nausea started within days. Morning sickness had been manageable before. Crackers and ginger ale, mostly in the early hours, fading by noon. This was different. This was relentless. She couldn't tell where pregnancy symptoms ended and medication side effects began. Everything blurred into constant physical misery. She'd wake up nauseous, force down the pill with breakfast because she had to, spend the next hour trying not to vomit it back up. The fatigue was worse. Bone-deep exhaustion that made climbing stairs feel like running a marathon. Was this the pregnancy? The HIV? The medication? The stress of everything falling apart? Her body had become a battlefield she no longer understood. She'd moved back to her mother's apartment, sleeping on the couch, 22 weeks pregnant and back where she started, except now she was sick in ways she'd never imagined. Every 2 weeks. Blood work. Viral load checks to see if the medication was working. CD4 counts to monitor her immune system. Liver function tests because the drugs were hard on organs. She became intimately familiar with the phlebotomy lab. The same chair, the same rubber tourniquet, the same question. Left arm or right? Always left. She was superstitious about it now. The nurse would hand her the requisition form afterward. Numbers she didn't fully understand but obsessed over anyway. Her first viral load, 47,000 copies per milliliter. 4 weeks later, 8,200. 8 weeks in, 1,100. The medication was working. Her virus was suppressing. But every appointment carried the unspoken question nobody wanted to ask out loud. What about the baby? They wouldn't know for months. Couldn't test definitively until after birth. So she swallowed her pills and waited and tried not to think about 25% odds. The ultrasounds were the worst. Before, they'd been joyful, seeing tiny fingers and toes, hearing the heartbeat, marveling at how much the baby had grown. Now, they were anxiety marathons. She'd lie on the table, gel cold on her exposed belly, watching the technician's face for any flicker of concern. Was the baby growing properly? Were the organs developing normally? Could HIV cross the placenta even with treatment? The technician couldn't tell her, wasn't allowed to interpret, just took measurements and images and said the doctor would review everything, so she'd wait. Days sometimes. For the doctor to call and say everything looked fine. Fine. Such a relative word now. Her baby was growing inside a body she could no longer trust. A body that had been poisoned by someone who claimed to love them both. All she could do was take her pills and hope it was enough. Her obstetrician referred her to a maternal fetal medicine specialist. High-risk pregnancy. Those words followed her everywhere now. The specialist was kind but direct. With proper treatment, vertical transmission rates, mother to child, drop below 1%. You're doing everything right. The medication, the monitoring, but we won't have definitive answers until after delivery. Can't you test before then? She asked. During pregnancy? We can test the amniotic fluid through amniocentesis, but it carries risks. Miscarriage. Infection, and it's not entirely accurate. The gold standard is testing the baby at birth, then again at specific intervals. How long until I know for sure? The specialist's expression was sympathetic. 18 months, sometimes sooner with newer testing protocols, but 18 months to be absolutely certain. 18 months of not knowing if she'd transmitted a lifelong illness to her child. 18 months of waiting. She joined an online support group for HIV-positive mothers, women from all over the country, all in various stages of the same nightmare. Some had transmitted the virus through drug use, others from partners who'd cheated. A few, like her, from partners who'd known and stayed silent. They shared stories, test results, hope and despair in equal measure. One woman posted, "My daughter just turned 2. Final test came back negative. We made it." The comments flooded with congratulations and crying emojis. Another posted, "6 months today, still waiting on results, can't sleep, can't eat, can't think about anything else." She understood that completely. Every kick from the baby felt like both a blessing and a reminder. A life growing inside her. A life she might have infected before she even knew she was sick. The guilt was suffocating. Her mother tried to help, came to every appointment, held her hand during ultrasounds, made her eat when nausea killed her appetite. "I should have tried harder," her mother said one night. "Should have physically stopped you from moving in with him. You couldn't have stopped me. I wouldn't have listened." I knew something was wrong. A 53-year-old man doesn't pursue a 17-year-old girl unless something is broken in him. She'd heard this before, after the confrontation, after the police report, but it hit different now. "He saw what Dad left behind," she said quietly, "the empty space, and he filled it with exactly what I needed to hear." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Your father has a lot to answer for. The damage he did by not being there, it made you vulnerable to this." They sat in silence, both mourning different losses. The hardest part was the uncertainty. She could control taking her medication, could control showing up to appointments, could control following every medical recommendation perfectly, but she couldn't control whether the virus had already crossed the placenta in those early weeks. Before she knew, before treatment started, when her viral load was high and her baby was most vulnerable. 3 months. He'd stolen 3 months of protection from her. 3 months when early intervention could have made all the difference. Now all she could do was wait. Take her pills, monitor her viral load, feel her baby move, and wonder if those movements came from a healthy child or one who'd spend their entire life managing a disease they didn't deserve. Every day was a countdown to an answer she was terrified to receive. And he'd done this to them, deliberately, knowingly. That was the part she couldn't forgive. The prosecutor assigned to her case was a woman named Lisa, 15 years in the district attorney's office, specialized in violent crimes and sexual assault. Knowingly transmitting HIV falls under aggravated assault in this state, she explained during their first meeting. We're looking at felony charges, potentially multiple counts given the pregnancy and endangerment of a minor, legally, the fetus. She laid out folders on the conference table. We've subpoenaed his medical records. The timeline is damning. His positive test result is dated 3 months before yours. We have prescription records showing he filled antiretroviral medications during that entire period. More folders. We've also subpoenaed his phone records, bank statements, and credit card transactions. If he was meeting someone, there will be evidence. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, text messages. The prosecutor looked up. I need you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. His defense will try to discredit you, make you look vindictive or opportunistic. Let them try. The evidence came together faster than expected. Medical records confirmed everything. His diagnosis, February 14th. Hers, May 22nd. Exactly 3 months and 8 days later. His prescription history showed monthly refills of Triumeq, same medication she was now taking. Filled at a pharmacy 30 minutes from his house, far enough that no one he knew would see him. Phone records revealed hundreds of calls and texts to one number. Richard Morrison, former senior vice president at Sterling and Cole Investment Group, his ex-boss. Text messages recovered through warrant. Can't meet today, she has a doctor's appointment. Hotel same time Thursday? Need to be more careful. getting harder to explain absences. The bank statements showed the rest. Monthly charges to the Meridian Hotel downtown. Always the same room. Always booked for 2 hours in the afternoon. Richard Morrison's credit card showed corresponding charges at the hotel bar. They'd been careless, comfortable, never imagining they'd get caught. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. Detectives arrived at his mansion with a warrant. He answered the door in a bathrobe, coffee in hand, completely blindsided. Bail was set at $250,000. He posted it within hours. Walked out of county jail the same day, climbed into his Mercedes, and drove back to his empty mansion. Money could buy his temporary freedom. It couldn't buy his reputation back. The local news picked up the story within days. His name and photograph everywhere. Wealthy retired banker charged with criminal HIV transmission. Her identity remained protected. She was just the victim, 18, pregnant, but his life became public spectacle. The details emerged slowly. The affair, the extreme age gap, the 3 months of knowing. His carefully constructed life collapsed in 72 hours. He'd tried to bury the truth. Instead, it buried him. The prosecutor gave her homework. Write down everything, Lisa Chen instructed. How you met, what he said, what he promised, how you felt when you found out, what your life looks like now, what you want the judge to understand. A victim impact statement, her chance to speak directly to the court before sentencing. If they got that far. She sat at her mother's kitchen table, pen hovering over blank paper, unsure where to begin. How do you summarize betrayal in words? How do you explain what it feels like to discover the person you trusted most tried to kill you? She started with the father wound, because that's where it really began. I grew up without a father. I didn't realize how much that absence shaped me until it was too late. I was 17, working retail, desperate for someone to see me as valuable. He saw that desperation, and he used it. The pretrial hearing was scheduled for her 3rd trimester, 30 weeks pregnant. Unmistakably, undeniably showing. The prosecutor told her this was strategic. The jury needs to see you, see what he did. Pregnant teenagers have powerful optics in court. She hated being reduced to optics, but she understood the reality. The courthouse was smaller than she'd imagined, less dramatic than television made it seem. Just fluorescent lights and tired carpeting and the smell of old wood. He was already seated at the defense table when she entered. Expensive suit, hair freshly cut. Looking every bit the successful banker he'd once been. He didn't look at her. She sat behind the prosecution table, hands folded over her belly, and stared at the back of his head. This man had held her, kissed her, promised her safety. This man had poisoned her while she slept beside him. The prosecution's strategy was simple. Let the medical records speak. Lisa Chen walked the judge through the timeline with clinical precision. His positive test, February 14th. First prescription fill, February 16th. Monthly refills, March, April, May. Her positive test, May 22nd. The defendant had 97 days of knowledge, Chen stated. 97 days to disclose his status. 97 days to protect his pregnant partner. He chose silence. His defense attorney argued contamination, suggested she might have contracted HIV elsewhere, implied promiscuity without saying the word directly. Lisa shut it down with phone records. Bank statements. Her employment history showing she'd quit work after moving in with him. The defendant isolated her, made her financially dependent, then infected her with a deadly virus while she carried his child. The judge set a trial date, 3 months away. She'd have given birth by then, and still wouldn't know if her baby was positive. She gave birth to a daughter in August, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Perfect in every visible way. But visible wasn't enough. They tested the baby immediately after birth. Standard protocol for infants born to HIV-positive mothers. The results came back 2 weeks later, negative. But infant tests aren't definitive. Maternal antibodies can cross the placenta, creating false positives or negatives. The only way to know for certain is to wait. 6 months. They had to wait 6 months for the virus to clear her system enough to test accurately. 6 months of giving her baby antiretroviral medication as a precaution. 6 months of doctor visits and blood draws and waiting. 6 months of not knowing if she'd condemned her daughter to a lifetime of medication and stigma and complications. 6 months that felt like 6 years. And then the day finally came. The appointment was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. She'd barely slept the night before. Just lay in bed, watching her daughter sleep in the bassinet beside her, memorizing her face in case everything changed today. Her mother drove them to the clinic. Neither spoke during the 20-minute drive. What was there to say? The waiting room felt too bright, too cheerful. Cartoon murals on the walls, toys in the corner, other mothers with their babies, oblivious to the terror consuming her. A nurse called her name. She picked up her daughter, 6 months old now, starting to sit up on her own, babbling sounds that almost resembled words, and followed the nurse down the hallway. Same examination room where they'd done previous tests. Same pediatrician who'd been monitoring her daughter since birth. Dr. Patel entered holding a folder. Her entire future was in that folder. Dr. Patel sat down, set the folder on the counter, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I know you've been waiting for this," the doctor said gently. Her heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Her daughter squirmed in her lap, reaching for the stethoscope around Dr. Patel's neck, completely unaware that her entire life hung in the balance. "We ran the PCR test twice to be absolutely certain," Dr. Patel continued. "And I'm happy to tell you," she couldn't finish the sentence fast enough, "your daughter is HIV negative." The words didn't register at first. Negative. Her brain struggled to process what that meant. "She doesn't have it?" Her voice cracked. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Your baby does not have HIV. The virus did not transmit." The sob came from somewhere deep inside her. Relief so powerful it felt like breaking. She pulled her daughter close, tears streaming down her face, body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for months. Against 25% odds without early treatment. Against 3 months of unknowing exposure. Against every terrible possibility that had haunted her since that ultrasound appointment. Her baby was okay. Her daughter was healthy, HIV negative, free from the disease that would define her own life forever. Dr. Patel handed her tissues. Let her cry. This moment had been building since the day she'd received her own diagnosis. "You did everything right," the doctor said quietly. "The medication, the monitoring, the delivery protocols, you protected her." But she hadn't protected her. He had endangered her. She'd just been lucky enough that the virus hadn't crossed the placenta during those critical early weeks. Lucky, against all odds. Her daughter would never know how close she'd come, and he would never know this relief. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented medical records, phone logs, hotel receipts, text messages, built a timeline so clear that even his defense attorney seemed uncomfortable defending it. Expert witnesses testified about HIV transmission, the importance of disclosure, the criminal nature of knowing silence. She testified on day 4, walked the jury through everything, how they met, how quickly she'd moved in, the pregnancy, the diagnosis, the confrontation, the 3 months he'd known. His defense tried to paint her as vindictive, a gold digger who'd trapped an older man and now wanted revenge. The prosecutor destroyed that narrative with financial records. She'd never asked for money, never tried to extort him, had moved back to her mother's couch and filed a police report the same day she found out. The jury got the case on a Friday afternoon. They deliberated for 4 hours. When the jury returned, she was holding her daughter. 7 months old now. Healthy, HIV negative, living proof of what could have been lost. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The forewoman stood. Middle-aged woman in a cardigan. She'd made eye contact with her several times during testimony, had looked physically ill during the medical expert's explanation of transmission risks to fetuses. On the count of criminal transmission of HIV, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of reckless endangerment? Guilty. On the count of assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm? Guilty. Guilty on all counts. She heard her mother gasp behind her, felt tears on her own face, watched him close his eyes at the defense table, shoulders sagging, the careful facade finally cracking. He'd gambled that wealth and respectability would save him. The jury hadn't cared about either. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. She'd spent those 14 days refining her victim impact statement, writing and rewriting until every word carried the weight she needed it to. When the day came, the judge asked if she wanted to address the court. She stood, left her daughter with her mother, walked to the podium with papers that trembled in her hands. Your Honor, when I met the defendant, I was 17 years old, working retail, raised by a single mother. My father had been absent my entire life, and I didn't realize how much that absence had shaped me, how vulnerable it made me. She looked directly at him for the first time since the verdict. You saw that vulnerability. You identified it, cultivated it, and exploited it. You didn't fall in love with a young woman. You targeted a fatherless girl who was desperate for someone to choose her. Her voice grew stronger. You knew I was searching for a father figure. You positioned yourself as everything my absent father wasn't: stable, successful, protective. And then you tried to kill me and our baby. She paused. Let that sink in. For 3 months, you knew you were HIV positive. 3 months while I was pregnant and vulnerable. You could have told me, could have protected us. Instead, you chose your secret over our lives. You sentenced me to lifelong medication. You gambled with our daughter's health, and you did it consciously, deliberately. Her hands stopped shaking. My daughter is HIV negative. She survived your betrayal. But I will spend the rest of my life managing a disease you gave me. I want you to spend years behind bars thinking about what you did. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in state prison. He showed no emotion, just stared straight ahead as they led him away in handcuffs. She felt nothing but relief. Today she's 25 years old. Her daughter just turned 6. Healthy, energetic, completely unaware of how close she came to a very different life. Every morning starts the same way. Alarm at 6:30. 1 pill. Triamic, taken with breakfast. Never missed. Not once in 7 years. Her viral load has been undetectable for 6 years now. Undetectable equals untransmittable. U equals U in the HIV community. It means the virus is so suppressed by medication that she can't pass it to anyone else. Not through sex, not through childbirth if she ever has another child. But undetectable doesn't mean cured. She'll take this pill every day for the rest of her life. Will attend regular doctor appointments to monitor her CD4 count and liver function. Will explain her medical history to every new partner, every new doctor, every new situation that requires disclosure. HIV doesn't define her, but it's always there. The financial reality is constant. Her medication costs $3,800 per month without insurance. With the insurance she gets through her job as a medical assistant, ironic she knows, it's a $50 copay. $50 she budgets for every month like rent or groceries. Non-negotiable. Life-sustaining. She works full-time now. Finally finished her associate's degree. Makes enough to support herself and her daughter without depending on anyone. It took years to rebuild that independence. The court ordered him to pay child support. He does irregularly, always late. She doesn't chase it, doesn't want his money, doesn't want any connection to him beyond the daughter they share and the virus he gave her. Her daughter asks about her father sometimes. She tells her the truth, age appropriately. He made some very bad choices that hurt people. He's not part of our lives anymore. Someday she'll tell her the whole story. when she's old enough to understand. She dates occasionally. It's complicated. Disclosure is required, ethically and legally. She tells potential partners early, usually by the third date, before things become physical. Some men disappear immediately, ghost her without explanation. She's learned not to take it personally. Others stay, ask questions, Google U=U, and come back reassured. A few have become genuine relationships, though none have lasted long. Single motherhood and chronic illness are a lot for someone in their 20s to navigate. She's okay with that. Her daughter is her priority. Everything else is secondary. She's alive. Her daughter is healthy. She has a job, an apartment, a future. 7 years ago, lying on that examination table hearing HIV positive, she couldn't imagine any of this. She rebuilt her life from ashes, and she's not done yet. She started speaking publicly 3 years after his conviction. That was 4 years ago now. It began small. A local support group for HIV-positive women, 12 people in a church basement. She told her story for the first time to strangers who understood. The response surprised her. Women came up afterward, crying, sharing their own stories of older men who'd targeted them young. Not all involved HIV, but the patterns were identical. The father wounds, the financial dependence, the isolation, the betrayal. A nonprofit that works with at-risk youth asked her to speak at a conference. Then a high school invited her to talk to seniors about healthy relationships. Then a college, then another. She said yes to all of them. Her story could save someone, could help a 17-year-old girl recognize grooming before it's too late, could give a young woman the language to understand why that older man's attention feels both flattering and wrong. Her presentations follow a pattern now, refined through repetition, but never losing their raw honesty. She starts with the father wound, explains how growing up without a present father created a vulnerability she didn't recognize, how that absence made her desperate for older male validation. Then the grooming tactics, how he identified her need and became exactly what she was missing. The gifts, the isolation, the financial control disguised as generosity. She doesn't shy away from the HIV transmission. Explains the 3 months of knowing silence, the criminal charges, the pregnancy terror, the relief when her daughter tested negative. And she always ends with the warning. Wealth doesn't equal safety. Age doesn't equal wisdom. And large age gaps, especially when you're barely legal, are red flags. If a man in his 50s is pursuing a teenager, ask yourself why women his own age won't date him. The message lands differently depending on the audience. Teenage girls see themselves in her story. The retail job, the absent father, the older man who seems sophisticated and safe. College students recognize friends in similar relationships, reach out afterward asking how to help someone they're worried about. Parents thank her with tears in their eyes. Say they're going home to have difficult conversations with their daughters about age gaps and grooming. And sometimes, the moments that matter most, young women approach her privately, whisper that they're in a relationship like hers, ask how to get out. She gives them resources, hotline numbers, legal aid contacts, reminds them they're not stupid for falling for it. Predators are experts at what they do, she tells them. You're not weak for being targeted. You're strong for recognizing it. Her story has become her purpose. Pain transformed into protection for others. Therapy became non-negotiable after the trial. Court mandated at first, part of the victim services package, but she continued long after the required sessions ended. Her therapist, Dr. Williams, helped her understand something crucial. She'd been dealing with 2 betrayals, not one. The first betrayal happened when she was born. When her father looked at his newborn daughter and decided she wasn't worth staying for, that abandonment created the wound. The second betrayal was the 53-year-old man who found that wound and poured poison into it. You can't heal the second without addressing the first, Dr. Williams explained. He exploited a vulnerability your father created, Until you grieve what your father's absence cost you, you'll keep seeking it in dangerous places. So she grieved for the childhood she deserved, for the father who should have been there, for the girl who thought she was unlovable. The hardest session came when Dr. Williams asked, "Have you considered reaching out to your father?" Her immediate response was anger. "Why would I? He's never tried to reach out to me." "Not for him," the therapist clarified. "For you, to ask the questions you need answered, to tell him how his absence affected you, to stop wondering." She thought about it for months before finally sending a letter. It was brief, direct. "I'm 25 now. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I contracted HIV from a man who targeted me because you weren't there to teach me what healthy male attention looks like. I don't need anything from you, but you should know that your absence had consequences beyond just missing birthdays." He never responded. The silence hurt, but it also freed her. She'd said what needed saying. His response, or lack thereof, was no longer her burden to carry. The most important work in therapy was learning to break the cycle. Her daughter would grow up with a present mother, with consistent love, with the security she'd never had. But more than that, her daughter would grow up seeing healthy boundaries, watching her mother say no, seeing independence modeled, understanding that love doesn't mean dependence. "The best revenge against your father and your abuser," Dr. Williams told her, "is raising a daughter who never feels the absence you felt, who never searches for a father figure in dangerous men, who knows her worth without needing external validation." She's determined to do exactly that. Her daughter will know she's valuable, protected, enough, everything her own father never taught her. The cycle ends here. If there's one message she wants other young women to hear, it's this: absent fathers leave daughters vulnerable in ways that don't become obvious until it's too late. When you grow up without a father's love, protection, and validation, you learn to seek it elsewhere. And predatory men know exactly how to identify that hunger. They can see it in the way you light up when they pay attention, in how quickly you trust their intentions, in your willingness to overlook red flags because finally, someone is choosing you. That's the wound. And predators are experts at finding wounds. They position themselves as everything your absent father wasn't: stable, protective, financially secure, present. They make you feel special in ways you've never felt before. And by the time you realize they're exploiting your vulnerability rather than healing it, you're already trapped. The red flags are almost always the same. Extreme age gaps when you're barely legal. A man in his 30s, 40s, or 50s pursuing someone who just turned 18 isn't sophisticated. He's predatory. Women his own age won't tolerate his behavior, so he targets younger women who don't yet know what healthy relationships look like.